Welcome back to another recording of the Elevate Media Podcast. I am Chris Anderson, your host. Today, we're going to get into succeeding against all odds, and you're going to hear why we are talking about that in a little bit. We got a great guest coming on today, John Brink. He's an extraordinary man who went from war-torn Holland as a child to building the largest secondary lumber manufacturer in Canada, all while living with ADHD and PTSD, and that's just super high level of what John has done and the accolades and the experience and the successes he's had in life. So I'm excited to dive into his story more, hear from him, learn from him, and I know you guys are as well. So John, welcome to the Elevate Media Podcast today.
Nice to be here, Chris.
Absolutely. Looking forward to chatting with you. Excited to dive into your life, your journey, and help myself and others listening to this learn from that. I would love to dive in, if you're open to it, kind of at the beginning. So growing up, I was a big fan, or not a fan, but a big history buff, or not buff even. I really liked World War II and learning about it and things of that nature. So what for you, like growing up in that time frame, Nazi-occupied Holland, just kind of help us wrap our head around like what that would even be like.
Yeah, I like that question, Chris, because it's kind of a unique time period for me right now and the next week.
Okay.
I was born in 1940, November the 1st, 1940. So I'm 84 and a half years young, I say. And we were liberated on April the 12th, 1945. By the Canadian Army as part of the Allied forces that landed in Normandy June the 2nd, 1944, pushed their way through France, and then the Canadians went north to Belgium, Western Holland, and I was born 15 minutes from the border with Germany in northeastern Holland.
Okay.
And so that's exactly next week, 80 years ago. And I remember it well. And again, to put it into perspective to your viewers, with all due respect, there are a lot of people that may think that war is, once the wars are over, things go back to normal. Well, they don't.
Right.
In a lot of cases, it will take generations before they ever do. And how precious it is to live and democratic rule as we do in North America, in both the United States and in Canada. And so for me, it's always important to share with them at least part of my history. And the first thing that I remember is, the Allied bombers bombing the German infrastructure in the northwestern part of Germany that touches on the North Sea. Where all the infrastructure, where they build the weapons for the war, Wilhelmshaven, Hamburg, Bremen, Emden, all those places. We were only 15 minutes from the border. Wow. And now my mom and dad were married in 1938. They were in love and everything was paradise for them. And then Adolf Hitler, the dictator, decided that Poland should become part of Germany. And then there was a danger that the rest of Europe would be attacked. And then my dad was drafted into the Dutch army on April of 1940. And for the last time that they saw him was just before the bombing of Rotterdam, where the Adolf Hitler didn't find that Holland capitulated quick enough. So he bombed the center of Rotterdam that killed thousands of people. That's the last place that somebody saw him. For 5 years. They wouldn't know if he lived or died. And so my mom, on her own, she had then 2 kids, was pregnant with me. I was born November the 1st, 1940. But I remember his Allied bombers overhead in 1943, 44, that region, when they were bombing that infrastructure of Germany. Hundreds of bombers. Hundreds of them. And the sound of that is a sound that I still even now still remember as a 3.5 year old little kid.
Well, that's
And
what I was gonna ask. Like, how did like that immediately my mind went to like like you being that age, that being that close. Like, what was the sound? Like, how do you describe the sound of that happening? I can't
I, I
imagine.
will never miss it, and I will never hear it again. I
Yeah.
know that. And I'm a pilot, and I was in the Dutch Air Force, drafted into it when I was 17, 18. But that sound I will never forget again. And my mom would take us out on the flat roof behind the house to look in the distance. We saw the sky was red from all the cities that were being bombed in
Mhm.
the process. And the reason she took us outside, she felt safer outside than inside.
Mhm.
And so that's why we were there. And there was always anxiety. And so the next thing I remember is that hunger is that in 1944, the Hitler decided to cut off all the food supply to Holland and other places. And we were without food. And the kids, myself, my brother, my sister, the three of us would go every morning with gunny sacks into the railroad yards, pick up anything edible and burnable.
Wow.
And the reason that we did as kids, they wouldn't shoot us, but they would put us one in the back. But then we were back the following morning. And then the next one was the winter of 1944-45 was the coldest on record in Northern Holland. And so I remember sitting in a little room in our house that we could heat, only that little room, and we sat around there, and it was very, very hot close by and very cold. I still remember the cold, the hunger, and all of those things. And then we saw far too much in 1945 when the Canadian Army started pushing out the German forces. We were 15 minutes from the border, Eastern Holland in the north, and they pushed them through. We saw far too much that we should not have seen. People being shot, people being dragged out of their houses, and never to return. And then the next thing that I remember is April the 12th, 1945, 80 years ago now, that the Canadian forces started liberating our region of Holland. And it made such an impression on me as a little 5-year-old that I knew from that point forward I would go to the land of my heroes when I grew up, Canada. And I did. And
Wow.
so, and I've been here now in Canada for 60 years. And so, but it was the Allied forces, the Americans and the Canadians working, and other countries
Right.
working close together from 1944 forward when they landed in Normandy on June the 2nd, 1944. And then it took them till August before they pushed their way through the German forces. And they went east and north, and the Canadians went north, obviously. But to see the Allied forces working together was unique for me. And I've always admired the Americans, friends, and the Canadians in North America, how lucky and how fortunate we are. And obviously, what happened after that is that, a lot of Europe was destroyed. It's again the Americans taking the lead and the Marshall Plan in 1947, rebuilding Western Europe together, again working also with closely with Canadians and other countries, but the Americans took the lead. And it was a time that was so deeply enrooted in me, is saying that's the example of freedom, of democratic rule. And so versus bureaucracies or dictatorships,
Mhm.
there was a fear in Holland, in particular, but Western Europe, that the Russians would come in and take over. A lot of them left and emigrated to the United States or Canada right after the war. And then obviously the Marshall Plan, and then
Yeah.
from there on in, what they admired, and I still do today, is that United States, Canada, and other countries, democratic rule is precious, delicate, but so precious. And what I like about the United States is the Constitution that protects everybody from dictatorships, or supposed to be, and it starts there with we the people,
Yeah.
and and so that's where the strength is. And so that's kind of what happened to me. I came to Canada, started with nothing, a suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and I had very little money, but I wanted to build a lumber mill. And so I landed in Vancouver, and I knew all the trees were in British Columbia, and so I went to the immigration department there in 1965, July 1965. Could speak the language, didn't know soul, didn't have a job. And at the immigration department, there was a German fellow. I could speak some German. I said, I want to build a lumber mill. He said, go to Prince George. That is 500 miles north of Vancouver, or 800 kilometers for European friends. And I came off the bus there with my suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and I counted my money at least 3 times. I had $25.47. But attitude, I'm always positive, always have been. I avoid negative. Passion, whatever I do, I give it 125%. Work ethic, I work harder, even still now, than anybody. And so, and I always get up at 5:30 in the morning, even now, and I always make my bed, and I always think I'm late, and so and that's what I do. And so, yes, I did get my mill and 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 other companies, but it's not about that. It's not about money. But so opportunity and being here in North America and the opportunities that we have. I fly around a lot in North America, do a lot of business in the United States. Usually sit always by the window in a commercial flights. And as I sit there, I look outside as I go through North America, Canada, and the United States, and I say, it's paradise. It is paradise. We are so lucky and so fortunate. So that's kind of where I am. And
That's
today,
awesome.
84 and a half. I'm very active and staying physically fit. This is my last book, Living Young, Dying Old. I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America.
Wow.
At 84 and a half, qualified for the Arnolds, and again, want to compete in the Arnolds again in 1926.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's amazing. So where would you say all that drive, that determination, that mindset comes from? Is it you were just born with it? Is it the experience you had as a young kid, or is it something you've learned along the way that other people could learn as well to have?
The foundation for me has always been attitude, passion, work ethic. That's what it has to be. The other part to me, which is very, very important, you already indicated it, is that it was not until 1997 that I picked up a book in a store here. And the title of the book that I picked up, I've already been here for 32 years. I was quite successful. And Driven to Destruction was the title of the book, written by Dr. Hollywell. And as I picked up the book, I don't know why, and the more I looked at the book, it's about ADHD. And I said, oh my God, that's me. Academically, I was not a successful story. I failed grade 3. I failed grade 7 3 times. So then people said to my parents, what are you going to do with this guy? And some people said, send him to the mentally challenged school. They said, no, we're not going to do that. So teach him a trade so he can work with his hands, because he's not bright enough, obviously, or something, so to be in school. So that's what I did. I became a furniture maker at 12 and a half years old. But I always knew that I was just as smart as anybody else, not better than, but just smart. But I had to start anew again. And that gave me the opportunity to do that when I left Holland with virtually nothing in 1965 to prove to me that I could do it. And, but ADHD became a big part of my life when in 1997, I picked up this book written by Dr. Hollywell about ADHD. And I said, it's a superpower.
Yeah.
And that kind of, where does the energy come from? Partially from that. The other one, mindset, attitude, passion, work ethic. And every day is a great day. And then I try to stay fit and healthy. My diet, exercise, sleep, all those basic elements are critically important.
Yeah, I agree. I think those are, I mean, uh, we just talked about on our team meeting today was, the words we say to ourselves are super important too. And having that positive attitude and speaking, good about yourself and what you're doing carries some weight. And so I like having that part of it and staying fit and taking care of yourself. But you said ADHD, your superpower, right? Yeah, explain that. Like, how did you go from figuring out, oh, that's me, I have ADHD, to seeing it as a superpower? Because some people are like, oh, sorry, I have ADHD, like it's a bad thing. How did you kind of shift that mindset there?
I always knew I was different,
Hmm.
right? Even from the time that that I failed school, which was not easy. So looking back at me, uh, obviously the Warriors and PTSD was a very important part of my life, still is today. The other part is the inner child, the fear of losing the only parent that we had during the war years always remained part of me. Got counseling for that when I was
Yeah.
50 years old, actually, very emotional. And but even then, going to Canada, I became very quickly very successful. Though I couldn't speak the language, started as a cleanup man. Very quickly, I was a foreman, then a lumber pilot, then the green chain foreman, and then a mill foreman. And within a year and a half, I was a superintendent of one of the biggest sawmills here in northern British Columbia. And so I did that. That didn't go quick enough for me. So because I wanted to have a mill, so within 10 years, I started this company now 60 years ago. Brink Forest Products, that is now part of the Brink group of companies, 10 other companies. And so I've always been active. I enjoy life. Every day to me is precious, likely because of what I've seen during the war years. The other part has always been part of me is that it took time for me to figure out who am I,
Mm,
and it was not until I discovered the book Driven to Distraction by Dr. Hollywell. Dr. Hollywell has written 18 books, actually, five of them on distraction. He
huh,
is ADHD and has dyslexia, so do I.
wow.
And so, actually, I do a podcast on the brink, and it's my podcast number 203 uh,
Awesome.
with Dr. Hollywell that
Nice.
wrote the book, against, the difference to distraction in
Mhm.
1993. I bought it in January 1997. I still have it in my studio. I will show it. Is that that changed my life? And Dr. Hollywell, amazing, amazing individual. Frequency of occurrence much higher than I initially thought. I may be around 8%. The more I heard about ADHD,
Yeah,
thought it would be, as in my interview with Dr. Halliwell, I said it's probably around 20%. He said, no, John, it's more than 25%. I
wow.
agree with him. And both male and female, although females will portray it differently than males, but globally, that's what it is. The other thing that I have found being successful in businesses, involved in a lot of companies, a lot of boards, and on and on and on. I got to know a lot of entrepreneurs, successful people. I concluded and suggested to Dr. Hollywell that I believe that of the successful entrepreneurs, and the operative is successful, that 50% of them are ADHD. He said, no, John, 75%. I
Wow.
agree with him. And so, the so that became a big, big part of my life. And then the other part, a big part of my life is communication skills. I was not good at that either. I had self
Right.
confidence about, the feeling intimidated, a lot of times I was okay in interacting in my own companies, but not outside of it.
Right.
And then somebody, an ex sister in law, said to me, "Hey, John, I want you to go with me to Toastmasters." I said, Toastmasters, what is it all about? Well, it develops communication skills. And I said, "Are you going to ask me any questions?" He said, "No, just go down and sit down there and listen to what they do." And halfway through the meeting, somebody said, "Hey, John, tell us all about you." I said, "Oh, God, I'm not so happy." But I stayed for 10 years, and it
Wow,
changed my life.
that's
And so,
awesome.
and I wrote a book about that as well. That's coming out in June. That's
Okay.
my fifth book, and I'm working also on the sixth. The title of that one is this one, all about communication skills. All those
Mm,
people that are successful, but drives them in a lot of cases is the communication skills and the
yeah.
ability to interact, articulate their thoughts carefully, and first and foremost become good listeners.
Mm. So if someone's out there and they're trying to become a better listener, a better communicator, what are some things they could do right now? Maybe they're not in Toastmasters. What could they do to start improving those communication and listening skills?
It's a good question, Chris. The first thing that I say is you have to develop confidence
Okay.
and you have to become a good listener. And then a lot of people think about Toastmasters is that it is all about speaking. It
Mhm.
isn't. It's
Okay.
about listening first, and then impromptu speaking or articulating questions or making a point critically important. That's what Toastmasters does, and some other organizations. But Toastmasters for me became very, very important because I was there for 10 years and I went to the highest level in Toastmasters, which is a DTM, Distinguished Toastmaster, and it changed my life. And I believe that in a lot of the success in my life, both in business as well as in podcasting, as well as a writer, I became a good communicator, and that is very, very important. But the for me the biggest challenge was to figure out who am I, why am I different, and it was not until I recognized ADHD as being a critical part of that.
And I think figuring yourself out, like knowing yourself is huge on your journey as an entrepreneur. But like for you, for instance, I mean, you moved to Canada, $25, a little over $25 in your pocket, can't speak the language, so not a good communicator at the time, but yet you still were able to start your mill and become successful. What things, or is it just you, or what are some things you did, actions that others could maybe follow that helped you become successful despite all those odds?
I like that question as well because I wrote a book about that. I feel that I have to share my experience. Not saying
Yeah,
hurrah, hurrah, how successful John is, but all the challenges along the way. That's
yeah,
why I wrote Against All Odds.
yeah.
It's all about not about how successful John is, but all the challenges along the way. Then the other one that I found was important to me is that I think I heard it on a US radio station that they said that 75% of the people that work in the United States, and I think Canada is the same, 75% of the people don't like the jobs. And probably 70% of the 75% are looking for another job.
Right.
And then I do a lot of presenting to younger people in
Okay.
particular, high schools, colleges, universities. But one of my points is that find your passion, as find something that you like to do. Say example, if you like to be a truck driver, talk to truck drivers,
Mm,
find out what do they do, how does it work, do they want to own the truck, talk to somebody that does that, or do they want to own more than an entrepreneur, find out what they do. You want to be a builder or a contractor, find out if you want to build houses or buildings, whatever you do, talk to somebody that does that as to what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages, or you want to be a lawyer, or
right.
you want to be a doc, or you want to be an entrepreneur, or all those things. Because most of your life you will spend in jobs that it makes such a huge difference. If you like what you're doing, then that becomes critical because if you don't, you take it home with you and it becomes part of you. So I wrote a book
Mm,
about that, finding your passion living the dream. And I started working. I left school, and a lot of people say to me, I failed grade seven 3 times. And I left school at 12 and a half years old. Now, tongue in cheek a little bit, people say to me sometimes, are you still feeling bad about that you left school at 12 and a half and only grade seven? I say, I do. I still do very much feel bad about it. I should have left earlier.
Yeah, right.
You know? So, but the point that I'm making is that it becomes so critically important that the sooner you have a direction, and that's what I had. My grandfather was a master carpenter. My dad worked in lumber. And then I started at 12 and a half years old working in the furniture factory. All those things helped me. And then I had always an interest in finding out what made successful people tick. So I
Yep.
would go all over the place to find people that made presentations, talk to people about what made them successful. And so therefore, the question could be that I started working when I was 12 and a half. I'm now 84 and a half. So for the last 72 and a half years that I've been working, is saying, did you find your passion, John? Yes, I did. And are you living the dream, John, every single day?
Yep.
And and that part is important.
Yeah. And I love that. And I think it's important to find that passion, but I think it's also important that people realize, like, even though you find that passion and you're following that passion, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean it's going to have rough days. Like, it's not just going to be all sunshine and rainbows when you find that. And
And
so,
it's a good thing,
yeah,
Chris. And that's a good thing because
yeah,
if you
yes,
don't fall down, if you don't,
yep,
that part makes you stronger.
100%. And I think, a little bit of that too is it makes you stretch. Taking those risks make you stretch as a person and improve. And I mean, you've taken risks, your whole life. Moving out of Holland for one. I mean, the risk of just living when you're a kid, surviving was the risk. But like moving to Canada and all that, like, so during your journey, what would
And
you
I
say
still
is
do
your
today.
yeah, exactly. And so what would you say your biggest risk has been? And I know there's so many, but is there one that kind of sticks out in your mind? Like that was a huge risk. And what was that like?
That's a very, very good question. Probably, yeah, I don't know. They were all in a way. So even today, we're negotiating on making some very, very big deals. We have 4 silos.
Okay.
That one silo is lumber manufacturing. Well, that's a real challenge because of, with all due respect to our friend, the president of the United
Yeah.
States. We don't know what will happen. They
Right.
try to put us out of business. So that's how serious it is.
Right.
But I'm still excited about that part. I've been doing it for 60 years.
Hmm.
The other company that I have is warehousing, distribution, and logistics. That is a successful company. The other silo is real estate, residential, commercial, and industrial, very, very active. All those companies will double or triple in growth in spite of all of that, in my mind, as we go forward. And then the fourth one is media. And so I'm very, very active in media. My
Yep.
podcasting, very, very active. We top 1% globally. I've done about 400 podcasts where I am the actor, and then and then another 200 and 250 where I'm the guest. We are approaching 1 million subscribers, so
Awesome.
lots of activity there. And then so all of those combined are exciting and keep me very, very active, very, very busy.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, with, taking these risks and starting these businesses, sometimes you have to kind of lean into what you like believe in and challenge some norms that are out there in the world. Have you come across that where you've had to challenge some of the norms in your industries and maybe shake things up or just stick to your guns, kind of as they would say?
Oh yeah, and I'm glad you asked me that question. So because I had it several times. I'm controversial, different than most other ones are. I
Mhm.
believe in in Canada, in the North America. and the forest industry has always been a challenge. I'm different. I want to add more social and economic value to the resource. I grew up in the lumber industry in Holland, where you don't even dare to step on a piece of lumber, even if it is a trim block. And so now what we are doing, we particularly one of the largest secondary manufacturers in Canada, that's what we do, add more value to that precious resource that we have. And that has been controversial. I was involved in one lawsuit, and if you ask me about it, that put me nearly out of business, where I took on there were fraudulent grading rules by lumber manufacturers. Actually, I thought it was local, and then it was regional, then it was the province of British Columbia, then it was Canada, and it was all the way in the United States as well. And it cost me virtually everything that I have, but I won the case. It is just like Chris was a very, very nice guy, very good guy. He walked across the street on green and he got run over by a car. Yeah. So I was right and all the other things, but it nearly put me out of business. But so I've been always somewhat controversial, have differences of opinion, but I will stay the course.
Mm.
And so that has been probably challenges even still today.
Yeah. What would you say your proudest moment has been? And I mean, you've stood up for things like that. What has been kind of you're like, I'm super glad I did that. Like, I'm proud that I did that.
About my kids, for one, obviously grandkids, and then and then I learned to give back to the community, and I grew up that way. I've always done that. I've always tried to be helpful to others that have challenges, and I believe in the lumber industry and creating skill sets. The College of New Caledonia here, I helped them with building the Trade and Technology Center. That's my name on it, so I'm proud of that. And I've been recognized for a number of other things, but that's not what I'm looking for. But being part of the culture, part of communities, to me, is always been the most important. It's not making money or having a lot of money. I don't need a lot of money. No matter what I do, I always make sure that I still have laying on the side $20.47. So it's those are the things that to me are the most important. Is giving back to the community, stay active, be able to look in the mirror and saying, okay, I think I did right.
Yeah.
Not wealthy. That's
Yep.
not important. So those are the things that are important.
I like that. I think, being able to look yourself in the mirror and say, like, I did the right thing no matter what.
Correct.
And I think that's huge. So, look, just kind of round things out with like some kind of rapid fire sort of questions. As a leader, what would you say is the most important quality to have?
Honesty, credibility, giving back.
How do you get that credibility as a leader? How do you build that?
I was born like that. That's always been important to me. It was my parents, my grandparents, that's what they stood for.
I like that. Yeah. So what's the biggest misconception people have about success?
A lot of people think that successful people, what they do is usually be busy planning holidays and bringing money to the bank. The misconception is that I suggest entrepreneurship and business and entrepreneurship very, very rewarding at times, but the cost can be very, very high. And it was in my life to the people around you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's always a give and take on things, right? You have the sacrifice and things like that. So what would your advice be to someone who's younger, maybe my age or younger, who might be feeling like they're failing right now at building a business or succeeding in life?
Look at yourself in the mirror and say, and I find with young people in particular, they always find this is wrong and that is wrong with me and this is wrong with me. Look in the mirror. There's only one of you, only one on this whole entire world, only one like you. and be at peace with who you are. Not saying it's special, but be at peace with that. And then the other one is that work hard, attitude, passion, work ethic, but will follow is success. And then that part, those parts are very, very important, and credibility critically important.
Yeah, love that answer. And then the last one, John, if if today was your last day, everything you did was gone, nothing would be remembered, none of your books, none of your businesses, nothing, but you could pick one thing that would be remembered out of everything. What would you pick to have as your memory going forward?
He gave back.
I like it. That's awesome. He gave back. That's a great thing to be known for sure. I love that answer. So, John, this has been fantastic. Thank you for being on and sharing everything you've done, your insights, your story. If people want to connect with you, obviously you have all your books. Where's the best place people can get connected from or with you to learn more from you?
John A. as in Adam or Aaron, Brink BRINK.com.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah. So everyone, make sure you go check out John's stuff. Get a couple of his books, if not all of them, and then just dive into learning from him. So much experience and such a worldview there. So again, John, thank you again so much for being on the Elevate Media podcast today.
Thanks, Chris. My pleasure.
Absolutely. And if you're listening to this, make sure you follow the show if you haven't already. It helps us just get this in front of more people to their ears so we can make a bigger impact in the world together. And just take in what John said today. Look yourself in the mirror and make sure you can, say, hey, we're doing a good job. We're being kind, we're giving back, we're doing our best, and keep moving forward. But until next time, go out there, continue to elevate your life, elevate your business, and we'll talk to you again soon.